Welcome to the Flex Uncensored podcast. Gio and I are here today with Jon Lambert, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Canon in Houston. And Gio, thank you for inviting Jon on because I know of Jon and I know of the Canon, but Jon and I were trying to figure out if we'd actually met. Maybe we've crossed paths, but have not had a conversation. So I'm excited to learn more about you and learn more about the Canon. And I'm guessing you're joining us today. Are you in Houston?
I'm actually in the same building that the background Geo is sporting is in. I'm just in one of the offices. If you look up to his left, he would. I'm waving, Geo. So.
Nice. There we go.
Nice. Thank you. No, it's been awesome to see the Canon kind of evolve this building. I'll let you, Jon, kind of talk about it here in a minute, but you have not been around since day one at the Canon, but have kind of taken charge and taken over kind of the ambitious plans that were put together by the founders. And so why don't we just kind of kick off with the background of the Canon and kind of, how you got to be in your role.
I do want to know how Jon goes from KPMG to the Canon. Not a typical path, so fill us in.
I'm atypical from the very beginning. I actually was a high school math teacher to start this whole thing off. So the fits and starts to a person's career don't make a whole lot of sense when they're going on. But then if you look back, you're like, okay, I can see how it happened. Yeah, no, I started education, jumped into tech from there, kind of tied to the back end of marrying South Florida girl and trying to take her to Michigan to live. And realizing that if she was miserable with the weather in June, that February would have been the end of my marriage. So was fortunate enough to get hired by Ford Motor Company, who was selling their computer services division to a company here in Houston in the early 90s. And they were hiring people in Detroit and relocating them to Houston. And I said, never been to Texas. No, it's hot. So let's do it. And so went through that whole process. And that's what brought me to Houston in 1992. Did tech for a bunch of years, jumped out of my tech experience into a couple of different tech-enabled startups. I'm dating myself, but we're talking about pre-internet days. And then went through that startup world with the dot-com boom and a bunch of different things that went with it. And that took me into tech development, which took me into consulting and back into startups, which ultimately we sold a company in 2011 to KPMG. So that was a startup success story. And I ended up staying with KPMG. And to their credit, we didn't look or sound anything like auditors or tax people. So they said, what do you guys want to do? And we said, all right, well, we can kind of help you out here and there. And so we spent some time looking at their global audit processes and then introduced them to data and analytics, which they're prolific at now. But at the time in the early 2010s, they weren't sure what that was. And so we helped with that. And then along the course of that process, we helped them identify a need and opportunity around corporate venture capital. So we started KPMG Capital in 2013 to go out and acquire kind of disruptive technologies to bring back into the partnership. And so that's what I was doing when my phone rang, and the guys that were the original funding behind the Canon, who are guys that were part of that entire story I just told you, going back 25 plus years at the time, 30 plus now, said, hey, we'd love for you to come run one of our portfolio companies. And I was at a crossroads in terms of what I wanted to do. I wanted to get closer to the action. And by action, I mean closer to the end user, closer to the founder. I was doing big global tech deals, which are cool. I saw the world, which is great. But I also looked around and said, I'm not exactly sure what impact I'm having. And so I said, hey, why don't you go do this? And had the pleasure of taking a 50% pay cut and a lot more headaches than I ever had in my life. But I've loved every minute of my 5+ years here now. So I joined essentially the day after the grand opening of the Canon West Houston, which is the background that Geo's sporting there. And it was really a request to kind of look at, we had opened this space on the west side of Houston, and we were all kind of looking at each other like, okay, now what do we do? And so let me backtrack a little bit around the origins of the Canon. So the Canon started in 2017. It was created not with real estate in mind, but with the concept that and the need that there was great startup ideas and innovation coming out of whether it was academia or corporations in Houston And those folks were looking around and saying, I guess I have to go to Austin to start my new business, or Silicon Valley or Boston or another established location. And if you take a step back and say, wait a minute, Houston's the fourth largest city in the country.
Yeah.
All of these resources have to be here. There was just no intention. And that was really the vision behind the creation of the Cannon in the first place. And so the community actually started to come together in 2017 in a very nondescript, I'll call it like it is. It was a crappy building, just adjacent to the one I'm in now, right here on Brentmore on the west side of Houston in the energy corridor. And it caught fire very quickly in terms of the growth of the community, the energy, excitement around, hey, wait a minute, there's people that are doing what I'm doing and I know how to find them and can talk to them now. And so it didn't take long in that process to recognize that one of the key needs that this group was going to have was physical space, right? It was kind of the crappy building they were in was busting at the seams. And so the investors made the decision to purchase property here and convert an old Stuart Stevenson pipe thinning plant that had been occupied by several different entities over the years, but had been empty for a couple of years, into the Cannon West Houston. And so it's a 130,000 square foot factory kind of retread. Would have cost them way less to just tear the thing to the ground and rebuild it, but we would have lost the aesthetic and ambiance of the space that we have. And so it has been a tremendous investment and became kind of our first, actually it was the second technically, physical hub location here in Houston. While this building was being built out, the team had gone and opened our first location, which is 675 Bearing, which is kind of the gallery area here in Houston. Small space that was about 14,000 square feet at the time. So this building opened in July and the grand opening was in October. And I started the day after the grand opening here and have not looked back. So that's, I'll pause there because if you let me, I'll talk till the clock runs out and you guys will be gone and I'll still be here talking. So.
Wait, so that was technically the second location, but now you have.
Now we just opened our seventh.
Okay.
That we manage full time. So we have a couple of different models now. So it's actually.
That's right. I'm looking at there's a lot going on. Yeah.
Well, wait, before you go getting ahead of yourself, let's back up and try to go in order. So talk about, I still remember walking in the first building, one story. First of all, far from ideal location. So I don't know who the broker / deciding factor was behind the site selection, but industrial, I'd call it even a tertiary submarket. And so what did they own the building? Was it given to them? I mean, how did they?
Did someone pay them to occupy it?
Yeah. There was certainly some foresight in what was going to happen in this region. So we're on Brentmore Street, which runs kind of parallel to Beltway 8 on the west side of town. And historically, you just didn't go to Brentmore unless you needed to buy chemicals or some form of raw material. That was it. And so when Mark Toon, one of the founders of Work America Capital, which was the venture capital firm that made the original investment, told me, hey, I got this cool project going on Brentmore. And I said, no, you don't. There's nothing cool in Brentmore.
No, yeah.
And then he came and showed me before the community actually started evolving. He came and said, hey, here's where we're gonna, and the wires are sticking out of the ceiling, and you know, it was in worse shape than you ever saw it, probably, Gio. But what was interesting was it was the working knowledge that it could have been a large cardboard box, and this community that we pulled together would have been thrilled, right? So, you know, if we had the requirement of a Class A space, the Cannon probably wouldn't exist today. But it was more about just give us a roof that we can get under, and we're going to just get after it in terms of building and growing businesses. And so yeah, that was the origins of that. And I don't know all the details around the vision, but ultimately, we now sit in what's the center of what's called Brentmore Founders District, which is a 30-acre project that is inclusive of our space as the center. We share the property with Bayou City Church, which is just adjacent to us. And then we have several other buildings on the property that have been converted to event space usage that we've activated. There's actually an outdoor bar that one of the warehouse spaces, they just tore the walls off of it, left the roof, and brought in shipping containers to be the bar. And now it's a pretty popular spot here on the west side of town with their sand volleyball courts and dog park and all that kind of thing. So, and very conducive to the kind of community that we have here. So yeah, no, it's really been an interesting process.
Jamie's like looking at this. She's looking at the pictures of it, trying to figure it all out. Yeah, and I still remember. So
No,
it
I
was
was
a
yeah, I was trying to find the founder. I mean, I love it's an incredible project. I love these like campus ecosystem projects that come kind of out of nothing and create a place. It's also, I mean, you just had a unique experience where you had the community. Like that's
Mhm.
not common. People talk
Yes.
about it, build your community first, but I
Right.
mean, in our
Yeah.
industry, just that's not really usually the case.
No, absolutely. And it was even
So,
even more stark because that entire community got to watch through a chain link fence as
yeah,
their future home was being developed, right? So
so
it's like
much
build
like
your own house and get to
engagement,
watch it.
ownership. Yeah.
Yeah. And then 85% occupancy from day one because they were all sitting there waiting to walk in. So yeah, it's really cool. The dynamic of this space specifically for your listeners is it's 130,000 square feet. About 70,000 of that is the space that we operate as the Cannon. So that was intended for all of the businesses that we were supporting, everything from individuals that just needed a flex desk all the way up through people that needed multiple offices. We missed the boat in the very beginning, and this is a lesson learned, right, in the process around, we didn't design out small suite spaces. It was all individual offices of various sizes. And so the gap that we left in the very beginning was we had companies that were growing so quickly that one or two offices became 6 or 7, became 10 or 11. And that's really inconvenient, especially when you have no hope of putting them all together in the same space. And so over time, originally we had 9,000 square feet that was not built out. We basically went in and built out 3 suites in that space. And now I think we have 8 suites in the entire space now, just because the big challenge that we've got is not on the front end, it's on the other side. So we lost in 2024, we lost 85,000 square feet of tenants on the top side, meaning they outgrew the space that we had to provide for them. And so that's a little bit of insight into our strategic model as we go in and talk to real estate owners that's differentiated a little bit from traditional co-working in that I'm really an incubator for your real estate project, right? We're not, yes, we're going to find you small tenants and we'll manage all the minutia of that flex space, but that doesn't stop there. We're also looking at what can we do to help these small tenants become larger and larger and larger to the point where they're going to outgrow my space. They're going to still want to be part of the community that they're in. And what floor does that mean that we can help you move them into? And so, for example, Amity Bank, which is segueing back to our earlier conversation, with our third location, the Amity Tower, 1811 Main Street, which is right in downtown Houston, right along the train line in Houston. That one, fortuitously, originally opened in January of 2020. You can probably imagine how daunting the 2020 calendar year was. But now has come kind of full circle and is 96% occupied. And I think there are 9 tenants in the Amity Bank building that started on our 13th floor. So they started as co-working clients, but are now long-term clients for within the bank structure, within the bank building. And so yeah, that's when we talk about value proposition in terms of stickiness of community and that kind of thing, that's really, really what we're focused on. But jumping back to West Houston, so we had 70,000 square feet that we're managing with our community. The other half of the building was intended to be service providers, just companies that were going to provide services and support to that large community. So at the time it was Texas Citizens Bank. They're now B1 Bank. They have a bank branch in our building. Baker Tilly Accounting and Tax Services was in that space. A couple other service providers, law offices, that kind of thing. But before we could fill that entire space up, a couple of things did happen. We had a couple of fast growing companies that needed more space. And so they've now taken up different sections of that. Corva, Cart.com are now in that space. And the other cool thing that happened was when you get this many early stage innovative companies, especially in the tech space, together in one place, the large corporations want to be part of it. They know, especially in the oil and gas space, right? So the oil and gas has made commitments around zero emissions and those kinds of things. They have no hope of delivering on those things inside their own walls. They have to get into where the innovation's happening. And so just happens today, Chevron's executive team is here today and doing all their meetings. And Chevron's technology makerspace. Chevron Technology Ventures makerspace is in our facility. Their robotics team offices out of here. Their drone group offices out of here. And so now you've got this interesting mix of corporate presence and startup presence, which gives us the opportunity to make connections that these companies would never have otherwise, right? So a little 2-person company that's got a new tech in the oil and gas or energy space has no hope of getting into front doors of somebody like Shell or Chevron. But if they're co-located and we just offer up the opportunity for them to collide with somebody in that arena, we've created an opportunity for them that they couldn't get anywhere else. And so that dynamic is consistent wherever we go in terms of we're not only looking for early stage startup businesses, but what are the corporations that want to be part of this as well? And that ends up propping up and kind of bolstering the stability of the community in our different locations.
Okay, so you need a lot of space for that type of ecosystem. Are each of your locations at that scale, or what?
No.
Okay.
No. This one is by far the largest. So
Okay.
let me go through the list. So Post Oak, which is that first location, started out as 14,000 square feet, and I think it's doubled now. So I think it's 28. It's entire
Right.
floor plate, the whole floor plate. AMG downtown is a 17,000 square foot floor plate. And so these are conversions of existing office buildings. So it'd be more what you'd see more traditionally. We don't have the capital to convert. Most of the money that went into investment into the Cannon early days went into making this building look like it looks. So it was a very capital intensive process, but worth the investment in hindsight. So yeah, our sweet spot is kind of 15 to 25,000 square feet in terms of space.
Yep.
And like everyone else, it's what we're trying to do is create work environments that people want to work in, right? So we try to keep it's a balancing act because we do the operating model. So we're not signing leases, we're signing operating agreements. And so we've got this balance of how do I create a work aesthetic that has enough different environments for my community to really enjoy working there, but also has enough revenue generating space to make the financials work for the real estate. So
I mean, that's it. That's the magic.
Yeah, you got it. You got it. And so we've got a pretty stringent methodology from a detail perspective now that we go through in that process in terms of, we'll go in, we get, pre-pandemic, it was very difficult to have that conversation around the operating model structure because the option was I could lease this out to one person for 10 years, or I could go through this really contrived process where I'm upside down on the front end and I might get upside on the back end, but I don't see that. And I really don't care. I'm going to be long gone by then. That was tough. We did it. We tried to do it. We sold one that way. Then lo and behold, COVID hits. And now I got a line of real estate guys at my door going, I just need a flex solution. I need somebody to do this. And oh, by the way, everybody else in our business is modeling everything the same way. So we use an open book model. We, in our financial models, everything is visible from a cost perspective all the way through the process. And I've done that just because it doesn't behoove anyone to get to a point in that process and for there to be a surprise and the financials to fall apart. And so we do a very collaborative design on the front end, kind of come in and say, hey, here's how we would do this. Here's the revenue potential for this space. Here's the specs for operating costs, those kinds of things. Here's kind of what we would project is the build out costs, which is a huge wild card depending on where you're at and what you want to do. And we're stewards of the investment because we're not putting that money up front from a TI perspective. That's our building partners. And so we try to reuse and leverage whatever we can within their infrastructure. So if we're converting an office space, Metro National, which we opened in May of last year, which is in Memorial City. It's about 2 miles from this location. A very interesting case study in terms of cannibalization or not. But that 2 miles actually traverses 2 major expressways, and it's an entirely different community than the building here on Brentmore. So we've been able to kind of channel people back and forth a little bit, but that space is now filled up in less than a year as well. And we're still at 95% occupancy here at West Houston. So it was a good call on our part to be able to do that. So yeah, that's kind of how that process fits together.
So let's talk about how you kind of do your site selection, how you create your partnerships. I mean, I think that's really unique from that perspective.
Yeah, no, great question. So historically, we have been opportunistic. It's really been, we've waited for the phone to ring and then assessed kind of what people were coming to us with. We've got a very small, lean team. And so, the pace of expansion has really been driven by, the opportunities that have come in. We've been very fortunate that if you look at our footprint in Greater Houston, we're very well dispersed in terms of kind of covering the different sides of the city. And so now we're at a point where we can be very selective and proactive around approaching real estate partners around opportunities, whether they're new projects or existing projects that fit into kind of where we have gaps in terms of physical hubs. And for us, it's really, it's really all about this space opened, and it wasn't a week before the masses that were coming to this space to be part of the community were coming to us and saying, when are you going to be in the Woodlands, or when are you going to be in Sugarland or Katy or one of those places? And so it was a real education. Houston's like any other large city. Nobody wants to go from one side to the other. And we're larger than most in terms of, I think we're 90 miles across. And so it became an imperative to us to say, it wasn't a land grab. It was more of how do we get package up the resources for what we have and bring them to the community to make, to create better value and more time for the startup founders and end users. And so that was really the driver for us to go into kind of the various communities. And so now we're in this kind of proactive mode of evaluating where we want to go next. We're doing kind of new market engagement now. So we're waiting on a decision on a space in Austin, which will be our first real kind of true new market. We've got spaces in the Houston market that are 2 hours away from each other, but that's all still Greater Houston and under our umbrella. Austin will be a true new market for us. Again, conversations still going on in Dallas, Atlanta, Louisville, Kentucky. So there's several different places where we're having kind of ongoing conversations with real estate owners, and we're pursued kind of, I think when people go out and do hey, we need co-working, we get thrown on that list because we look a lot like co-working. And I'm okay with saying I'm not interested in managing your co-working facility, but I think there is an opportunity to build a community that would be very interested in using your space as its kind of central hub. And here's how that's different than, talking to Industrious or, somebody else that's kind of the typical kind of mass market opportunity. So
your model still is grounded in customer acquisition. I mean, you still have to, like, if you go to Louisville,
yeah,
you're looking for opportunities to pull together, startups, founders, like certain profile, but it's not like they're all sitting somewhere waiting for a space. You still have to get the landlord partnership, build the space, and attract those customers, just like a co-working space.
You got it.
Okay.
You got it. And what we try to do in that regard is, and this is where, if you looked at our website and got confused around some of these locations where I didn't talk about there being physical locations, what we've done as part of an exercise of saying, how do we get the resources into communities without having to wait for a physical space to be available, is kind of the digital element of the business, right? So building digital community, kind of aggregating and creating energy around that community. And then using that, this is kind of best case scenario, right? I think all of us would do this. Is do you want to build it and then go get the people, or do you want the people sitting there waiting for a building, right? Okay. And so when you see on the website the Silk Fulshire in Texas City and different locations where we've got digital community active, that's exactly what we're doing. We're mobilizing the startup communities through our digital platform. We're supporting those communities in those places. And then what ultimately happens, so in the last 2 weeks, I've had 3 conversations with developers in the city of Fulshire, which is west of Houston, further west in Houston, around projects that they have coming that they've worked with their EDC and the EDC's talked to them. And so they're interested in us considering their project as our physical hub when the time comes. So we're kind of planting seeds on that process. So we'd much prefer to have the community all activated and up and running. Doing the same thing in College Station, Texas, for example, which is the home of Texas A&M. Not a whole lot of other activity. There's some traditional co-working there, but really nobody that's focused on kind of that developing and nurturing that startup community and creating something bigger there. And so So yeah, it's really just kind of picking and choosing at this point where it is we want to put our energy and efforts and really grow the innovation startup community in different places, and then stand ready for, hey, we need a physical hub, right? So you talk to the EDCs and the mayors in all these cities, they all want a ribbon to cut, right? It's hard to cut a ribbon on a digital platform. So we're like, we would love to have a physical space. Just, introduce us to who you know in the real estate space, and let your EDC know that they can participate in this process by creating whatever incentives they're comfortable in doing. And then, we're off to the races in terms of kind of putting a model together.
So do you have somebody on your team who's dedicated to the digital platform? Because there are lots of people
Yes.
listening, certainly to my podcast, who would love to run the model that you're running. Like,
Yeah.
dream, right? I've got digital, so I can expand, I'm not just limited to but
Yeah.
digital platforms, because that's part of, what I do and the work that I do for the co-working industry. Also not that easy and take a lot of focus and marketing and, it's a whole.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And nobody's really done it well either. I mean, it's what we set out to say, hey, we've created this kind of unique vibe in our physical spaces.
Yeah.
And it's a cool place to be. And you get a good feeling about it. And our goal was always, hey, we need to create that same vibe in a digital community. Well, we did plan on the pandemic kind of forcing everybody into an exercise of all digital all the time, and now having to kind of recover from what wasn't necessarily a great experience for folks. So we're still kind of driving down that path. And so from a strategic perspective, and kind of sneak peek into kind of strategy of the Canon big picture, we're in the process of segmenting the Canon into two separate businesses. The workspace business will continue kind of doing what it's doing, and the digital business will become essentially a SaaS offering.
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. I'm like, they're kind of two different. I mean, there's overlapping.
Sure. Well, the workspace business
but
will always be a customer of the digital business.
Yeah.
But the digital business, and what you just said before, we have an opportunity if we separate that from the workspace and are non-competitive in that regard. Our digital business could provide community support to anybody, anywhere, right? So we want it to be as inclusive as possible in terms of bringing in, communities of startups and getting them access to resources and those kinds of things. Plus, it's way easier to go to the investment community and talk about a SaaS AI offering and not have to mention, oh, by the way, there's this real estate looking thing that's attached to this that includes all of these locations, but you don't get any of that real estate. So yeah, it's
just operating income, and it's it's asset light, and then you can talk about community adjusted EBITDA if you'd like.
Yes. So yeah, lots of good reasons to do this. And so, and it'll allow us to very specifically focus on growth of both of those businesses from a segmented perspective. So I'll retain kind of oversight of the two entities, but we think it'll be a good thing for us moving forward on a number of fronts.
Yeah. Got it.
Well, as far as back to your question about the team, I mean, what does that team that's going out and looking for those locations look like? I mean, are these people just calling you? Do you have a business development person? Do you have a broker out there calling economic development, all that stuff?
So most of it has been done in-house historically. As we've gotten into the new market search process, we've forged really strong relationships with CBRE, of all people, who now own Industrious in Atlanta. That team has been, they know our story as well as we do and can tell it as well as we do, and see the differentiation between us and traditional co-working. And so their job isn't to take us into every co-working opportunity. It's to identify opportunities where we might be the right fit. And so, for example, I'm getting ready to do a meeting with a group that's connected with Georgia Tech on redevelopment of a historic building in Midtown Atlanta that I've actually toured as part of my time over there for kind of development and potentially our involvement in management of a space that will be dedicated toward kind of Georgia Tech startups being part of that structure. So that's where we stick out like a sore thumb as it relates to who's the right partner in terms of managing space. That's kind of what we do and how we do it. And then the Austin opportunity, Cushman Wakefield, we got connected with Cushman and have two great representatives of their same thing. Spent a significant amount of time going through our model so that they understand it and can speak to it. And so they're the ones that kind of ran our RFP for potential spots in Austin proper and are helping us through the negotiations for the one that we hope that we land in. And then also, our model there we view as very similar to here. So create an anchor location and then start looking from a peripheral perspective at what are the right suburbs for us to create smaller hub spaces in, so that we've got that network effect across all of Austin. So yeah, it's really been, we've managed the nuts and bolts. And then in terms of introductions and opportunities, we've got, a network of brokers out there that kind of know what we do, know where we fit, and when a real estate owner, and it really comes, where we're successful is where the real estate owner can wrap their head around the value proposition beyond the financials for the square feet that we're managing, right? So as soon as I get to a conversation where my building owner or my broker or my representative, whoever it is the decisions based on the results of the financials, I'm basically walking away at that point, because the value to them goes far beyond what I'm generating in terms of revenues per square foot. Now, I can't be way off the reservation in terms of that. But the value of me as an incubator, the value of our community from a traffic and visibility perspective into these spaces, all of that needs to resonate with the decision makers. And where that's happened is where our spots are located. People embrace the idea of, I can, even at building owners that have come and said, hey, can I make investments in some of these companies? And I said, as soon as you do that, we're not going anywhere, right? You're now invested on multiple layers in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. So that's kind of the success criteria. And so I try to get to that as early in the process as possible in terms of, where's your head on this, and what's your big picture objective with your portfolio, and what do you want to accomplish?
Wait, I have a question. So if you're doing a partnership model, how do your brokers get paid on these deals?
So it's not this. It's a little different in terms of the model being different. The way we've structured it is as a multi-tranche payout on a percentage basis for the contract value. So it's not a lump sum contract, but the contracts do have a contract value.
Yep.
And then we, just like we're incented to fill the space, and our profit and rev shares are base targets, the payouts for the brokerage fees are aligned with those same targets. So that's the easiest way to explain it.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. That's one of the barriers to these deals, right? Is
Sure.
brokers don't understand that, and then they don't,
Yeah. Easier to do from our perspective, harder to do from the broker trying to introduce a startup or a small business into our space. That's the one that has been very difficult to figure out in terms of kind of sourcing, members into your space, because there's not a lot of extra overhead in that process coming from anywhere. So
as far as, you're now skipping the states, right? I think that's always interesting when operators start bouncing out of their home cities and then home states and everything around that. What's the goal around that? Are you just going to pursue opportunities across the country? Is there a specific area you're kind of focused on? Kind of where's your head at?
Yeah, the skipping is really just opportunistic. It came down to people that approached us in these cities around specific opportunities that kind of fit what we try to do. Our initial focus, both digitally and physically, is kind of innovation in the state of Texas. So, because of where we sit, and we all know this, we're in the middle of the 9th largest economy in the world in our own backyard, right? In terms of the Tri-City Texas Triangle, if you will. So we see an opportunity to aggregate innovation community across the state at the digital layer. And then we think as that community becomes, hits critical mass, then we'll have opportunities to follow that and build, physical hubs as both central and kind of regional to support that community. So, for example, I'm in Midland, Odessa, I think Odessa was voted the most boring city in Texas not too long ago. It is rural West Texas. Interestingly, they have a huge financial coffer because of the oil business that's out there. They have tremendous number of connections to the city of Houston because of the energy, oil, and gas industry. And so they would love to have an innovation hub, as would Chevron and Shell and others that operate out there, so that they don't have to bring all their technology and development all the way back to Houston. They can do it out there. And so our objective is, how can we start creating community, partner with the Midland and Odessa to create community out there. They've already been, kind of vocalized, we would love to have a physical hub. And so the conversation in April is around where and how do we start to kind of mobilize, and can this be kind of the central hub for what we'll call the West Texas Collective. So we've got a North Texas Collective, Central South Texas Collective, Eastern Gulf Coast Collective, which is central to the Houston market. And that's how we're segmenting the view of the different economic development communities across the state. And we'll try to get into those communities and connect them digitally first, and then follow those opportunities with conversations around where does it make sense to have a physical hub of various sizes.
Now, as far as, let's talk about, for a while, Jamie, you're incredibly passionate about family. So you were actually making a long commute from Dallas to Houston because you were taking care of your parents, and that's recently changed. But tell us about your parents and what they mean to you and how they were able to help you get to where you are today.
So kind of as it mirrors this story, my parents, we all lived in Houston I think we came back to Houston in 2013. We were in Atlanta. We came back to the Houston area 2013 as my parents got a little bit older and needed somebody close. My brother and sister are off doing a bunch of different things. And so we came back to Houston, just kind of keep an eye on them. And by the 2017, 2018 timeframe, when all my kids had graduated from high school and had gone off to school, my parents were at the point where they needed more full-time attention. And so we made the decision. We bought a property up in Aubrey, north of Dallas. I had two sons at University of North Texas at the time in Denton. And so mom wanted to be close to some of her kids. So we built a house as the guest house up there, sold my parents' house over in Katy, and moved up there so that we could take care of them. Well, this was November of 2018. And of course, my phone rings in 2019 saying, "Hey, will you come run this company in Houston?" And so, to Gio's point, I wasn't about to say, "Hey, we're packing up and moving back to Houston."
Yeah.
And so I commuted for like 5 years, almost 5 years, back and forth. Unfortunately, in that period of time, my dad got sick and ultimately passed away in February of last year. And my mom's still with us. My sister now is living in Denton, and my mom is with her. All three of my sons ended up back in Houston working, and I was commuting to Houston. And so my wife kind of looked at me and said, "This is crazy. Everybody's in Houston but me." So we put our house out of market up there, and we're all here now. But yeah, in terms of formative relationships and people molding you into who you are, my mom and dad were clearly, there's not enough to give back to them to make up for everything they've done for me. And so we were able to do that in that period of time, and it was a fantastic time having them that close. And so I'm still back up in Denton on a regular basis, visiting with my mom while she's still with us. So,
What would you say? Who are you close to, your mom or your dad?
wow, good question. I was probably, you know what, I probably a cop out, but it's probably equal. There was a lot of things everybody tells me I walk like my dad, I talk like my dad, I have my same sense of humor, all of those things. But he was a school teacher too, which kind of lends itself to why I ended up in that profession. And he worked 3 different jobs to just basically to take care of us, and we never felt like we were in need of anything. So yeah, I had a very different relationship, but a very close relationship with both of them.
Well, then we'll switch it around this way. So if your dad had to say his favorite thing about you, what would it be? And then if your mom had to say her favorite thing about you, what would it be? And vice versa. What are your favorite things about each of them?
Okay.
And it's hard to just come up with one, but you can do it.
Yeah, good question. So let's do my dad first. I think the thing my dad probably appreciated the most is he was a fixer and could fix anything. He's one of those guys that, if anything ever broke, you didn't take it anywhere. You fixed it and figured out how to fix it. And whether it was part of genealogy or whatever, I've kind of gotten the same. I've got the same makeup, right? So I'm very much a fixer, which is great in all places except generally a marriage where your wife doesn't always want you to fix things. And so I'm working on that side of it. But I think that would be the thing that he probably appreciates most is that I've kind of followed in his footsteps from being a fixer. And then my favorite thing about him, his favorite statement or comment was always, in the eternal scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. And that sounds blasé, but that's not what it is. He was a man of faith, very much believed in God. And so in the context of what's going on in the world around you, his statement was always, hey, put this in the big picture. It doesn't really matter. And so don't let it become, don't let it take you over. Keep your eyes on what does matter. And so that, in terms of the lasting impressions, that's my dad's side. On my mom's side, wow. I probably think she appreciates the most is the fact that all three of her kids have gone out of their way to take care of her. And a day didn't go by when we had the house up there. That's the only thing I really regret about having to do this whole process is we kind of built that guest house for them, and she loves gardening, and so she had her own garden. I had to put that in, and for her, and she loved doing that. And so anytime I was there, which was generally every weekend, 2 or 3 times a the weekend, she would pull me aside and just thank me for giving her the opportunity to have this and be here and do this. And so, I think she's very appreciative of that with all three, my older sister, my younger brother as well. And then with her, again, she's responsible for praying me through life. So it's, she is constantly surrounding us with angels to make sure that we're safe. And that basically, has made me kind of appreciate same things in adulthood and be the same way with my kids in terms of, knowing where to put your trust and belief. And so that's probably the thing I appreciate most about her, because I wouldn't have that same faith if it wasn't for her.
That's awesome. How often do you get to see them?
I'm back up there probably every other week now. So it's just, I get a chance to see my mom. Yeah, probably every other week. She's unfortunately dealing with dementia now and losing her short-term memory. And it's both humorous and sad at the same time. And she knows it, and that makes it difficult. So trying to maximize the amount of time. My dad was the same way before he passed away. It was, his short-term memory, he couldn't remember anything, but you start talking to him about something he did when he was 14 and he could describe, all the details. So it's a crazy disease, but yeah, trying to maximize my time with my mom before it's her time to go home.
Wow. No, I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, I just remember us having that conversation back when you were making the commute. You're like, I can't move them back. And, they've gotten situated where they are. And so kudos to you for going out of your way to make their latter years certainly memorable and comfortable.
It's a funny thing when you're younger. You don't recognize how far bent over backwards your parents are for you most of the time, and then you have kids of your own, and you're on that side of the equation. But then when you start looking back at it, it's a no-brainer to do whatever you can to, it's not a payback thing, but it's just an appreciation and taking care of the folks that have loved you all that time. So
yeah, good, Jamie. You're on mute, rookie.
Totally. Thank you for sharing a little bit of your personal family story and for sharing everything you're contributing to the innovation community in Texas. I've been really interested to hear about your model and just the passion and how you're growing it. It's pretty unique. I mean, you have a set of, people you're serving kind of on both sides.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to be aligned and all for it. And so I think it's probably spend a lot of time aligning and making sure everybody, is on the same page about what you're trying to accomplish. It's incredible. I love it. So
thank you. I appreciate it. And I didn't mean to make it sound like I was any great shakes in this whole process. There's armies of people that are, have the same vision and are trying to accomplish the same thing. And so You mentioned that, what makes it exciting is that it is differentiated, right? There's nothing worse than being out there and just having to be the best of 10 different people trying to accomplish the same thing. It's doable, but it's not a lot of fun. So we see a need, and we can stay focused on that need. And if the ball moves a little bit in terms of the need, we can move with it, right? We don't have to be locked in. And as long as we're, for us, that's our motto for this whole thing is kind of making the founder the hero. So it's all about that first, and my brand people will smack me upside the head, but I'll never put the brand in front of making the founder the hero, because that's what we're here for. And so yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's been great to hear your story. Are you attending any conferences this year?
Jury's out. I got so much going on.
Yeah, I know. It's always
all of them. I want to be at all of them, because I always learn and learn a bunch of great stuff and meet a bunch of wonderful new people. It's just the balancing act of
sometimes you got to be heads down. I hear you.
Yeah, which plate stops spinning if I don't do this. And so, no, my hope is that as we evolve things and get a little bit more stability, I'll have a little bit more visibility and time into investing in that. Plus, I got a couple of folks on my team that it would make sense to be part of that as we split the workspace business off. More involvement with your organization will make a lot more sense for those folks.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thanks again for the time.
No, my pleasure.
Thank you so much, Jon.
All right, you guys take care.
Take care.
Cheers.